The quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. Guilt is a relational responsibility. Guilt is an accountability to the other.
The process shapes the experience. The form is more important than the content.
Need motivation?
Watch your top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Esther Perel, and my take on her top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Create incentive systems.
There is no incentivized system as in the private domain. So people just think, why bother?
Right.
And that's the difference, is that the ones who have good relationships are the ones who created their own internal incentivized system.
What are some of those incentive systems that you've seen over time that really work or are effective for long-term relationships?
I would say the first thing is almost one of the first things that our parents teach you. Please and thank you. Do you know how many people stop thanking their partners? Thank you. Thank you for doing this for me. Thank you for picking up the shirts. Thank you for,
Making you feel appreciated.
Yes, appreciation. Appreciation is huge.
Yeah.
Gratitude, acknowledgement of the presence of the other in your life. Not, did you do this? Did you call? Did you pick up? Do this? Half the time. Expectations. Yeah. Of course, expectations is often a resentment in the make. It's like, with the expectation comes the fear of it's not going to. Thank person, first of all. And because it also makes it feel like this is not a given. Nobody owes you squat. You're not owed anything. You're not that important. You're actually quite replaceable.
Rule number 2, pay attention to your relationships.
I think Inbound is about innovation and about the future of the workplace, right? I would not have been here 10 years ago. There would not have been a keynote on relationships at a professional conference, at a business conference. It would have been about KPIs, performance, efficiency, bottom line, you name it. It wouldn't have been about what is considered soft skills. And the soft skills are now the bottom line. And those soft skills for a long time were considered feminine skills, which you know what happens to those. They're idealized in principle and discarded in reality. So this importance of saying, relationships at this point are really undergoing a change, but they're also threatened. They've become more and more polarized, and people are less and less able to actually manage the complexities of relationships. And pay attention to that. The quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. Pay attention to it in work. Don't think it's a side product. Don't just do it when there is a crisis. And recognize the importance of relationships in your life. It's an interesting thing how, because everybody seems to live it, it's never actually treated like a proper topic of inquiry, rather than just kind of, we're all doing it, It's not true. And that would be the first message, including here, talk to strangers. Leave your phone on the table when you go to the bathroom, when you're at lunch with somebody. Call home and thank the people who actually made it possible for you to be here. Put this notion of my relationships and my accountability to my relationships really front and center. It will make a huge difference in your life, in your teams, and in your workplace altogether.
Rule number 3, don't be complacent.
When people start out and they have a lot of goodwill and they give a lot of benefit of the doubt and they make a point of thanking the other person, acknowledging what they do, validating how they feel, the experience of being seen is part of the building of the trust. The experience of being known, the experience of having somebody who has deep attention on you and is curious, fundamentally curious to get to know you. That kind of penetration that is highly erotic, as in you feel alive, you feel vibrant. It's not in the sexual sense of the word erotic. This is what the charge that people feel. You perk up, you sit like this. Complacency looks like this. That's the position. It's like whatever, you don't notice anymore. You don't really pay attention. You start to feel like you're a function. You are defined by the tasks that you do and no longer by the person that you are. It's a multitude of those things that ultimately create step by step a disconnect. That's what I mean by complacency. It's a laissez-faire like that, a laissez-aller where you don't notice things, you don't acknowledge them. And the flip side of that is that you basically just acknowledge the negative. You become completely distorted in your perception. You have a big bias. Whatever is good is a given. There's nothing to say about it. And whatever is bad can be amplified to the nth degree.
Rule number 4, find multiple connections.
Give each other a lot of individual space. Not everything needs to be shared. People have different passions, different interests, different friends, and they need those separate spaces to exist. Admiration, I think, is huge. Because admiration is also that you kind of really see the otherness of the other person. Don't try to make your partner into one person for everything. There is no such a person. Find multiple sources of connection, of intimacy, of friendship, so that you can have a group of people support you, and don't have one person who has to be there for you for everything, especially when you're in the dumpster.
We used to have a village of people to do that, and now we just expect one person to be the village, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One person for the whole village. That is a unique. And then we're upset when they don't fulfill the mandate. And that's the more important. Like, I can't talk to you. You're not supportive of me. You're not excited for me. Excuse me. Find other people.
Right. I can't be everything for you. Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you do it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a new habit. And I want that for you. I want you to build the habit of self-belief. So what I'm going to do is email you every day for 254 days a link to an unlisted video that will shift your belief forward. To get on it for free, the link to join is in the description below.
What I want to do is I want to use radio to entertain people and help them achieve their dreams.
Successful people do what they hate to get to where they want to be.
Because being a really, really good listener is one of the most underrated secrets to success.
Rule number 5, learn to compliment.
The research says basically 65% of startups don't succeed because of the fallout between the co-founders. This is in case anybody cares if relationship actually matters. And it can be 3 people, they sell, they still have to be 5 years. 2 of them don't talk anymore. The third one is watching this debacle. How do they handle this? 5 years is a long time to sit in such a rut. Or it can be, 2 people who have started together. One is constantly looking for expansion. The other one is kind of, slow. We don't have to. And some of them are partners in life, and some of them are just partners in business. But what you have in a co-founder thing is this. At the beginning, for sure, it is passion for the project. It is a love affair in which 2 people lose sense of time, lose sense of boundaries. Everything is possible. I mean, it actually matches a little bit the story of nascent love and nascent passion. And then you begin to hit reality. And then you have to deal with the cycles of relationships: harmony, disharmony, repair, or passion, disillusion, reconnection, however you want to name it. The same thing happens.
Yeah.
You're dealing with issues of complementarity.
Yep.
Instead of polarizing, why do you do it this way? You realize that you actually need that person to do it this way because it's what gives you the opportunity to do your thing. And that notion of working the complementarity is the juice of a mature relationship. And it's all of that we work with.
Rule number 6, acknowledge remorse and guilt.
When you hurt someone, nothing helps you more than the person who hurt you to say to you, I have remorse and I feel guilty for hurting you. Even if they don't feel guilt about the experience of the affair itself. Maybe you think that the affair was one of the greatest things that you have experienced in a long time.
Fantasies or whatever, yeah.
You've been a mother and a wife for the last 7 years and you haven't had a minute to think about yourself and you felt like you had completely died inside, and for the first time you reconnect with your own sensuality and your own aliveness, and you remember that you're more than just a mother and just a wife, for example. So you may think this was really important to me. But nevertheless, what it meant to you and what it does to your partner are two different things.
Right.
So my acknowledging that remorse and that guilt is essential.
Is the first step.
First step.
Yeah.
And that is very different from feeling shame. Because when I feel shame, and I feel so bad about myself, I can't believe I did this, it's more self-involvement.
Right.
It's more about
it's like,
me. You know.
Make it about me so you can say it's okay or whatever, yeah.
Yes, I feel so bad about myself that I can't feel bad for what I did to you.
Right.
Right? So I have no empathy. I still have not in the empathy.
Yes.
It's like you need to be able to feel bad for making the other person feel bad.
Right.
And that means that you can't be so bad about you because then it's all about you. Big difference between shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Guilt is a relational responsibility. Guilt is an accountability to the other. That's the first one. And the second thing is that I then become the vigilante of the relationship, meaning that I, for a while you are asking me the same questions again and again because you're trying to figure this out, because your whole reality has just been shattered, I am able to tell you, it's okay, I am here. Just keep asking. I'll answer you. I'm not going to say, come on, enough already. Haven't we gone over this? Let's move on. Let's move on. It's over. Don't you see? No. I cannot rush you. I have to give you the space to make sense, to be in your pain, to hurt, to get angry, to push me, to pull me, until we slowly settle. And there is a period like that of that acute crisis that you just can't push. You have to go through it because it is in the nature of the beast.
Rule number 7, check yourself.
People in a relationship, by the way, especially when they come to couples therapy, you know, I'm a couples and family therapist primarily. I'm a systemically trained therapist. I deal with issues contextually. Most of the time when people come to couples therapy, they don't come to say, I came to check myself out. Couples therapy is often a drop-off center. You know, they come to tell you, here's my partner, and let me tell you what I think is the matter with that person, because I'm an expert on the other person. People stop looking at themselves because they're completely focused on what's wrong and what's off and what's missing in the other. And the first thing you do in couples therapy is you say to the people, we're going to reconfigure the lens. The day you come in and you start the session by talking about what you have done to improve things or what you have done to deteriorate things, we're working.
Rule number 8, restructure.
Most of the people today are going to have 2 or 3 relationships in their adult life.
Marriages or just relationships?
Committed relationships. Yeah. Marriages. I could say marriages, but let's say in Europe, so many of us don't marry. So I would say committed relationships. Yeah. Most of us are going to have 2 or 3 committed relationships in our lifetime, due to divorce, due to death, various things. Mm-hmm. Some of us are going to do it with the same person. I have had probably 3 marriages to the same man.
Wow.
Not because we divorced or anything, but because over 30 years, we have had to redefine ourselves, to restructure everything that you do in companies, you know, to change our brand.
What works for 5 years is not going to work for the next 5 years.
That's right. What works when we are just 2 is not the same as what works when we are 4.
Right.
What works when we're in our 20s isn't the same as when we are in our 50s. What works when we have this type of career is not the same as now. Yeah. You know, and I think that the very principles that you apply to companies today, flexibility, fluidity, the ability to reinvent itself, to redefine itself, to manage tradition and innovation, is really what has to enter into all modern love. That's what coupledom is about. Those who can do it with each other, and the other ones do it by finding a new person.
So what's the ideal relationship moving forward in our...
It's this. It's you sit every once in a while and you say, how are we doing? What are the strengths between us? I actually think people should have do different commitment ceremonies in the course of a marriage.
Really?
Yes, I think that every few years or every year they should have a little summit, or they should have a little, whatever they want to call it. They could have a ceremony, a kind of where are we at? A checking in. How are we doing?
what has been good in our life? What could we do better? What could we do differently? Are we doing right by our children? Are we giving, are we meeting some of our important needs at this point? What has changed for us? We've just been sick. We've just lost a parent. We've just lost a child. What's changing in our life? And to actually address this head on. What the problem is in couples is that most of the big topics are addressed when there is a crisis, rather than when actually things are good.
When you're calm.
When you're calm. Of course, you have less incentive to change when things are good. But you have less creativity to change when things are bad. Right. Same for companies, same for couples.
Rule number 9, take the leap of faith.
If you think that trust is it will never happen again, and until I know that it will never again, I can't trust you, then you will never trust. Because trust, as Rachel Botsman says beautifully, is an active, responsible engagement with the unknown. It's a leap of faith. If you have to know before, then you will never trust. The act of trust is the engagement with that which you can't know for sure. That's the definition. And to stay or to go is not dependent just on that. Because you may have been betrayed about certain things while a lot of other things were staying in place. It's very contextual. And so you think you have a history with betrayals of before. What is this the first time? What has happened? How the most important thing when you have been hurt or harmed, this is what Tarana was talking about yesterday, is the fact that somebody comes and acknowledges that they have hurt you. Nothing is more important to the healing than that.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is get to the root.
You never fight over the thing that you think you're fighting over, or talk or argue, whatever it is. It's not the content. It's rarely the content. If I think that you don't care about me, no matter what we talk about, the fact that that's what I think is going to permeate how I interpret what you're saying. If I think that you want my well-being, I will interpret everything you say from that angle. The process shapes the experience. The form is more important than the content. This is like golden rules. If you want to write down the 10, And with that comes the notion that people fight over 3 things primarily: power and control, trust and closeness, respect and integrity. And once you know that, you start to look, you don't listen for the noise and the content, especially when people have 20 years together, there's a lot of stories they can come back to. You just look, what is it that they are really fighting over? What do they experience from each other at that moment? Is it about power? Is it about trust? Or is it about recognition?
Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you just watch a video and you get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That's not good enough, Believe Nation. We need to take some action. But when you watch a video, you get motivated and you create a specific plan of action, that number jumps from 35% to 91% chance of you following through. And when you publicly commit to other people, like leaving a comment down in this video, your number jumps to 95% chance of you actually following through on the plan you set for yourself. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Leave it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
I think the biggest killer for relationships in general, doesn't matter if they're short-term or long-term, is contempt. Contempt. You can have volatile relationships, but people scream, fight, but they make up and they know that fundamentally they care deeply about each other. Contempt is a form of dehumanization. That's the research of one of the big researchers on relationships, John Gottman.
Really?
The 4 horses of apocalypse, he calls them. One is criticism.
4 horses of what?
Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, got it.
Criticism, defensiveness, right? It's like every time I say something to you, you can't just say, that makes sense, or tell me more, or let me try to understand this, or yes, I'm really sorry, yes, that is a bad habit of mine. No, I constantly defend and counterattack and put it back on you, and, Criticism is, I can't just say, I want you to do this. It's like, you had to let this sit here again. Right. It's like, you're doing this on purpose, right? I've had to tell you 5 times, I don't want that iPad on the table here. What kind of a thing is this? This is just in spite. Can't you just ask for something rather than make a judgment on the entire person? Because criticism is a veiled wish. Behind the criticism, there's actually something I want from you, but I have a way of asking it in such a way that guarantees I'm never going to get it.
Right. That's passive-aggressive energy. Oof. Yeah.
You can leave the passive out of it. It's aggressive direct.
Sure, yeah.
It's aggressive direct. I'm like at you. I'm picking at. I'm going after you. So because it's less vulnerable than to put myself out there with a request and say, it would mean a lot to me when I ask you this, that you would do this. And sometimes I've already asked it to you like that twice or 3 times, and I begin to get more and more upset. By the time people come to me, they've often asked very nicely for years before. I don't get to see that because usually people come to the therapist late in the game. So defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, silent treatment. I talk to you, you look up. You're somewhere else. I can't get a response. You withdraw, you withhold, all of that. And contempt is that gaze. It's that face that just says, really? You can, with one facial expression, literally reduce somebody to nothing.
Wow.
And I think that one is probably the end of the rope.
Everybody has a relationship history. Everybody grew up with people that were either there for you or less there for you, or not there for you at all. Everybody either wished they had gotten more attention or less attention. You understand? Some of us got a little too much of something, and some of us got too much neglect and absence of something. And everybody here has narratives about relationships. Meaning, you can all ask yourself the questions. Did you grow up in a family that talked about relationship as something central in your life and saw it as important? It was a relational orientation to life versus a task orientation to life. It was one in which you were told people are there for you. You can trust them. If you have a problem, go and talk to them. Or were you told, this is you. You have your own legs to stand on. Nobody is going to come in and solve your problems. And does that influence the way you actually either collaborate or compete? Because you think that people are there for you, or because you don't think so? Basically, were you raised for autonomy or were you raised for loyalty? It's not an either or, it's an emphasis. Were you raised for interdependence or were you raised for self-reliance? And given that many of you are entrepreneurs, the answers are very interesting about that. Where you got your messages, and what are the narratives and the beliefs that you have created about that. And here's the most important thing. Don't ever think for a minute that your relationship dowry doesn't come with you to work. It doesn't stop at the door of the building where you go to work. When you talk about relationship accountability, when you talk about trust and all of those things, go back and find your story so that you can see how you can edit it and write new pages to it.
As you've worked with all different people through these relationships, is there a sort of like common mark or common marks of successful relationships that come up time and time again?
Yeah. I'm a couples therapist, and I don't know if you know, but in couples therapy, rarely do people come to tell you what they have done wrong. They don't really come to tell you what's the matter with them. They come to a drop-off center, and they come to tell me, this is my partner, I will be the expert on what's wrong with that person and fix it. I think by definition, relationships that do well are relationships where people take responsibility for their share without being mired in shame for it. And it's safe to take responsibility, safe to own your stuff. And people have a sense that, if you want to change the other, you change yourself. The biggest turn on is confidence.
Right.
Confidence. You ask people, when do you find yourself most drawn to your partner? Every description has to do with when they're in their element, when they're on stage, when they're when they're doing their sport, when they are radiant, when they are in their studio, on the piano, on the horse, you name it. It's when they are in their element, i.e., they don't need me to take care of them.
They're not depressed and down
not
and
needy.
lonely and sad.
They're not needy. They don't need me, because desire is about wanting you. Love is also about needing you.
Relationships that work well are relationships that really straddle the two fundamental sets of human needs. It's the need for connection and the need for freedom. It's that relatedness thing. You need to be able to have a base, but you also need, and you need to be able to have belonging, but you also need a space for becoming. So that's the place where you can express yourself, where you can change, where you can grow. If you can straddle the anchor and the waves, you have a very good system. Same thing on the vertical. You need stability, but you also need change. You need hierarchy, order, discipline. Any parent knows that you manage discipline and love. You need a structure, you need organization. But if you have too much of it, nothing can move and you get rigid and you fossilize. And if you have too little of it, you go into dysregulation and you go chaotic. It is that dance between these polarities where people find their bliss.
I always had a clear sense that my life was not going to be small.
Sure.
My life has to be big. Big doesn't mean successful and money. Big meant meaningful, rich, layered,
It's not necessarily well known or famous, but feeling full. Yeah, not dead.
Not dead. I mean, there's a reason I write about eroticism, right?
Yes.
And that sense that I was not going to be mediocre. I'm not content with just the average of something, that it has to be not the best, it has to be the right one for me at that moment. That may be the beautiful spot or the right friend to be with or the right act to take in relation to somebody or to some cause. But that sense that my life has to be big.
If you want to change the other, change yourself. If relationships are made up of interdependent parts, if you change one part and consistently, non-contingently hold on to it, sooner or later the other one has to adapt to something. But the same thing would be true, and this is something I do want to say, particularly in light of the conversations we're having at this moment, where people are saying, why should I help you? You go figure out your stuff, You men, you people, When you help the other person change or grow, it is enlightened self-interest. Don't think you're just doing this for them. If we are interdependent parts, if they change, so does your life.
See, the interesting thing is that it's not because you don't talk about something that it doesn't exist. And if I go and I ask audiences all over the world since 2009 now that I began the research on this book, how many of you have been affected by the experience of infidelity? About 80% of the people raise their hand. And that means that they were the children of parents who were unfaithful, or they were the children who were born in an affair, in a love story.
Really?
Or they were the siblings, or they were the friend that was consoling a broken heart, or they were the friends that was listening to the confidences of someone who's in the thralls of an affair, or they are the third in the triangle. It is systemic. But the topic of infidelity, which has been historically condemned, is historically practiced, shrouded in secrecy and shame, and hence kept very, very silent, and unfortunately not helpful to the thousands of people who grapple with it. So I've spent the last years working with hundreds of couples who've been shattered by the experience of an affair and of infidelity in the US and abroad, and I thought we can do better.
So what's the definition of infidelity then? Or how should we be defining it? Is it thinking about being with other people? Is it flirting? What's the line? What's the boundary? What's the definition?
So the definition keeps on expanding. That's the first thing. It is no longer just because you got pregnant from somebody else. With contraception today, the definition has become, is it watching porn? Is it chatting? Is it a massage with happy endings? Is it staying active on your dating apps when you're already seeing somebody more steadily? Is it reconnecting with your exes on Facebook? It is actually rather unclear, and it is often left to the people to define it. But there are three major elements that I think make it very clearer for me anyway to define it. And the first thing is that it usually is organized around a secret. The constitutive element of infidelity is the secrecy. When it's not a secret, when it's consensual, it's a complete different story. So the secret is at the heart of infidelity.
So when your partner doesn't know or isn't aware.
That's right.
Then it's...
Yes, and of course that today requires you to ask what must be shared and what is private. What is the extent between privacy, secrecy, and transparency? Then the second element is a certain kind of emotional involvement to one degree or another, even if it's hit and run. There still is an emotional involvement. It takes effort to make something mean nothing.
Right?
Yeah. So the quality of that involvement with the person, with the sex, with the feelings, that. And then the third one, which is really the most important one, is that it's a sexual alchemy. The element of sexual alchemy is not sex. We know that most affairs are way less about sex and a lot more about desire. Now, desire for what? Desire to be desired, desire to be seen, to feel important, to have someone's attention, someone who cares about you, desire to feel alive, desire to reconnect with lost parts of yourself. Way more important than the sex itself. The kiss that you only imagine giving can be just as powerful as hours of actual lovemaking. The mind is the most important sexual organ. These three things, secrecy, emotional involvement, sexual alchemy, intersecting with each other, are the three central elements of what makes infidelity. But today, that we don't have religious institutions necessarily telling us what is the king of sins, it is left to us and our relationships to make sense of this, to define it, to know where our lines will be with our partners, to know when we cross those lines, and if it's about thinking, if it's about remembering, it's about fantasizing while you're with your partner, if it's... It is a subject that is deeply entrenched in our lives and often very difficult for us to open up.
My father was illiterate.
Okay.
My father and my mother, actually, both of them came to Belgium by chance after each of them being 4 and 5 years in concentration camps in Poland. They both were the sole survivors of their entire family. They came with absolutely nothing. They were illegal refugees for 5 years before they even became legalized. And my father always was a person who said, it doesn't matter how brilliant they are or how rich they are. What matters the most is how decent they are. And when you are in a concentration camp, you get to see the limits of a person's humanity and the stretch and the outreach of a person's humanity and their decency. And for some reason, that always stayed with me, meaning don't get impressed by all the appearances and by how everything looks. Look at the person. And then he said, and a friend is the person who will always do more for themselves as they will do for themselves. That's your friend. And check people out on that basis. One of the things that happens when couples are in conflict is that by definition, conflict creates a contraction. It stiffens. There is no flexibility. There is no nuance. There is no possible. There is just categorical. So people instantly go into you're always late. You always do this. You never care about what I say. You never show up when I need you to. And it becomes factual, as if it really is the case. And one of the very important things to understand in couples communication is the fact that a lot of what is presented as fact is actually an intensification of someone's experience. I feel like you never show up. That's not the same as you never show up. And to not shift my feelings to pseudo-factual talk. When you say to somebody, you never, the first thing they're going to do is give you an example of the last time when they did. Just to prove you wrong, just to dismantle the whole thing. You never clean up. You never pick up the kids. You never write to me. You never call to me. What about that time? And they'll show you the one and only sometimes, but it is the one and only time to refute your theory of them, because who can take on such a condemnation, full package condemnation. So the best thing you can say is it feels like that happens all the time. Probably you don't do it nearly as often as I think you do, but in this moment, I don't see the other stuff. In this moment, I just feel like it's just so
annoying, you know? And you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be pissed, but you're not allowed in the same way to think that your experience, therefore, is the reality or the truth. It is the truth of your experience, but not necessarily the truth of what happens.
There is a phenomenal crossing of parallel tracks that is happening currently. On the one hand, a matching set of expectations. You know, when you come to personal life, romantic life, the expectations that you would have with one person, what once an entire community used to provide. The same person is going to give us security and stability and dependability and reliability and predictability, and the same person is going to give us awe and mystery and passion and novelty and excitement and danger and fill in the bucket. This dual set of needs like that, you know, for most of history, marriage was for survival. Then we brought in the companionship, romantic element, and now we want relationships for self-actualization. Well, the same thing is happening at work. You know, you don't just end, you know, you go to work and you don't plan to spend 20 years there and work your way up step by step. You know, the Wall Street Journal had an article I just read yesterday. It was called "Quitters Are Winners." It's like the more you leave, the faster you grow, kind of thing, and the more you're going to get better jobs. And this notion that after 2 years, something has to happen. And if you know, I used to say that you left marriages if you were very unhappy, and today you leave them if you think you could be happier. But the same thing happens with a job. You don't leave the job, you know, because they closed the factory. You leave the job because you don't feel that you have been promoted properly and fast enough. And that rising on the Maslow ladder of needs, you know, that notion that it's about self-actualization, about identity formation, about belonging. The fact that we bring to love market economy, and we talk about having a good deal in our relationships, but we bring to relations, to work, a language and a vocabulary of relationships. We talk about authenticity, belonging, empathy, trust. When was that the bottom line language of business?
You were advising someone that just got into a relationship in the last month, or a recent relationship they just got into and they're watching or listening. Would you advise them to have certain conversations early on once they realize they're going to be, you know, committed to each other or give it a shot and be monogamous with each other? Would you tell them to start talking about these things, even when it's the puppy love and it's the romance time? Is that the time to talk about it? When do you talk about it?
That's a fantastic question, because in the beginning you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to jinx it. Yeah. And then you don't want to talk about it because you didn't talk about it before.
Exactly.
And then you're looking for the right moment to talk about it. And then when you bring it up later, the person says, have you been thinking about this the whole time and you haven't told me? Have you done anything? So now I'm already suspicious. Why are you talking? Look, I think the simplest thing for the difficult conversations is to have them be integrated as part of the whole thing. When you talk about previous relationships, you ask, have you been heartbroken? Have you ever left somebody in a shitty way? Have you ever lied to somebody? Have you cheated on someone? Have you been cheated on? Have you ever made up with someone who cheated on you? Have you ever been able to, you know, do you have trust issues about, in general? You know, because of your mother, because of your father, not even because of your own experiences. You know, infidelity is a conversation like you talk about intimacy, like you talk about other relationships. I mean, if you go in a business experience and you're with a new partner, you probably would say, what have been your experiences with other co-founders? You know, what have been your other experiences with business partners? Have you had good experiences? Is this experience sitting on the top of a bad divorce from before? You know, in general, whoever you choose next is always chosen by default in relation to the one that preceded.
Right.
Anyway, so it is right there. And then you say, listen, this is not because I'm thinking about it or because I want to do it. It's because I actually want to get to know you, and I want to get you, and I want you to get to know me. Then is the conversation too. When you love, what is your experience about exclusivity? You know, many people find it is the romantic ideal makes that question forbidden, because once I have found the one and only, and that is the one for whom I'm willing to delete my apps, and that is the one for whom I've stopped my looking. You are now the person that has so captivated me that I stopped searching. That's it. My FOMO is taken care of. Doesn't matter that there are another 1,000 people out there. You caught me. You know, how am I going to then say to you, you know what? On occasion, I still think about this one or that one or my ex, or I have attractions. this is normal. We choose not to act on them. Monogamy is a practice. It's not a dogma, and it's not natural. It's a choice. It's a practice that we exercise because we choose a certain relationship that we want to be in. What people do, look, we want one partner today to give us everything that involves stability and security and everything that involves playfulness and mystery. Okay, that's the grand ideal. Okay, I want to be cozy with you and I want to have an edge and I want you to surprise me and I want you to be familiar and I want you to give me continuity and I want you to give me novelty. That's it. As if it's a, right? And no Victoria's Secret is going to solve that.
Yeah.
Right? So then there becomes, what is desire? Desire is to own the wanting. If you ask people a question that goes like this, I turn myself off when? I turn myself off by. Not you turn me off when, and what turns me off is. You're going to hear, I turn myself off when I do emails, when I spend too much time on the phone, when I overeat, when I don't exercise, when I have bad days at work, when I don't feel confident, when I numb myself, when I feel dead, when I don't feel thriving, when I'm not alive. You will really hear that it has very little to do with sex. And when you ask people, I turn myself on when or by, I awaken my desires. Not you turn me on when, and what turns me on is, which is, i.e., you're responsible for my wanting.
Right.
What people will talk to you about is when I'm in nature, when I'm connected with my friends, when I get to do my sports, when I play music, when I listen to music. It's stuff that gives me pleasure, that is alive, that is vibrant, that is vital, that is erotic in the full sense of the word as life force.
What were some of the main messages that you grew up with around relationships at home, in school, in your community? Were you told relationships are central, they matter, they nurture you, people are trustworthy, they want to help you, if you have a problem, reach out? Were you raised for loyalty? Certainty is the enemy of change. Meaning that most people are capable of more than what they are and what they do, but they don't always know it. And that strength model, that resiliency model accompanies me a lot. So when you can always be right, but it's not difficult to be right and alone. That's what happens in many relationships. You stick to your thing and you think you're right, but you're right and alone. The second thing that is really fundamental for me in thinking about relationships is that it is not the content that matters nearly as much as the form. Do you understand that? Meaning, yesterday, in that beautiful conversation we had at night, you could have thought that it was about this story versus that story, when in fact it was about what was underlying and what was the form that was underlying. What are the three main hidden issues that exist below a lot of relationship dynamics and relationship conflict? Is either about power and control, either about closeness and care, either about respect and recognition. It didn't matter what the stories were that people were telling. What matters is that each one wanted their story to be recognized and each one wanted the other one to do it first. Form is what, if you have a certain pattern, a certain model, you will find that you can talk about green peas in South Korea or the next investment you're going to make and the tone will be the same. Get off the subject and watch what you're doing. And use these three hidden dimensions to see where is the problem.
So how does someone regain trust then? Because we were talking about this earlier. How do you regain trust and regain open communication if someone's been unfaithful or just hurting them for a couple of years in a relationship and you feel like it's not working?
You know, it's interesting because you're asking me this, and yet you, as an amazing role model, have spoken about some of your own experiences of abuse. Mm-hmm. So you know this question. How do you let someone touch you, come near you, not feel like they're going to harm you? Understand the difference between caring touch and hurtful touch. Mm-hmm. Allowing yourself to experience pleasure again. Allowing yourself to surrender without thinking that while you're not on guard, nothing bad is going to happen.
Really challenging.
Right. Okay. But it's that same trajectory, right? It's like you begin to, first of all, well, in this case, you're child versus adult, but you hope that it's not because one person hurt you that you lose your faith in humanity. You hope that you know that there are people who are not harmful, that they really are good people that care and love.
I would say relational intelligence starts with relational self-awareness. If you don't have it vis-a-vis you, it's very hard to suddenly start to listen to others. If you are self-critical, it's going to be hard to listen to other people say things without hearing them criticizing you. I mean, it's an extension. Yep. So that doesn't mean it's just, this concept of you should love yourself first. And no, we learn to love ourselves because we are loved by others. This doesn't happen out of context. It's a both and. But there is something about a certain kind of awareness. One of the great levels of awareness has to do with two major distortions. I'm sure some of you have never done this, but I have. So one of them is this, confirmation bias. I have a view, right? I could be here and say, this woman is here to have a great conversation with me, and I am in there with her, and I'm going to enjoy this. Or I can have this notion, this woman and all the people who interview you, they're always out to get you. They just want to make you look stupid. And I am going to interpret every one of your questions with my confirmation bias. Yeah. I'm going to look for evidence that reinforces how I see myself and how I see the world relating to me. That is a major trap. And the second one is, if I'm in a bad mood, I will think that it's because, there was traffic and the circumstances of my day made me in a bad mood. But if you are in a bad mood, it's because you're a nasty person. Mine is circumstantial, yours is characterological. That trust is something that gets cultivated over time through tests and experiences together with other people. Of course, this has changed because we have a shared economy in which we are trusting total strangers with our home and our most precious belongings. So the whole definition of trust is shifting. But it's difficult to have a feeling of belonging when you don't stay long enough, or to have a feeling of belonging when you're hired by the day and by the hour because it suits the numbers of the company. And every book these days about relationships is going to talk about belonging, or the lack thereof, and about loneliness, or the isolation and the lack of connection. This is the two main subjects that everybody is talking about. Partly because when you dismantle a system, like the one that we had, and you introduce a new social system, you can become evangelical about it, you can be very happy about all the changes, but you have to deal with the consequences of the changes. And one of the things that Dan Siegel was talking about so beautifully yesterday is that an individual, a body, a society, a relationship needs to regulate itself. And one of the main things we regulate ourselves on is between stability and change, between chaos and rigidity, between the past and the future. When we have too much change going on all at once, we become ontologically anxious or anguished because we can't catch up, which is partly what is happening now and what has been propelled in the last year by the new president of this country and by the new presidents of a bunch of other countries and by the Me Too movement. It's a unique educational opportunity, but it makes a lot of people very nervous.
If you want 10 more amazing rules from Esther Perel, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
It's not because one person hurt you that you lose your faith in humanity. You hope that you know that there are people who are not harmful, that they really are good people that care and love.